Hello, welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions with CreativeMind. I'm Debra Maldonado.
I'm Dr. Rob.
And today we are talking about personality. And for the next 5 episodes, we're going to go through the Big 5 personality test and talk about how that applies in Jungian coaching.
Absolutely.
But before we begin, I do want to ask you if you can do us a favor, subscribe to our podcast so you can listen to each episode when it's released every week, and it helps us get more listeners and more people to this content.
Yeah, so welcome.
Yes.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about personality because it's a really important construct in psychology, in coaching, and it helps us determine who is a good coach, right? And how can we define a good depth coach so that people can make the right choice when they're looking for a coach training program, right?
Yeah, a lot of people say, am I meant to be a coach? But also I think personality related to Jung in a broader sense is a lot of personality tests out there. There's the Myers-Briggs, the Big 5, all these different types of tests, the archetype tests and things like that. And then we, they're used in many different ways. So we want to kind of really hone in on the Jungian coaching model of working with personality. And the most important thing is that our personality isn't who we are. It's who we're expressing ourselves as in that moment, but it's not a fixed concept. So if you take a test and you think, I am this personality, you're limiting yourself. So we're going to open your mind to seeing beyond just the labels and create your own design of who you are. That's what individuation is, right?
Yeah, so it's a big construct, the whole idea of personality, and there's a lot of different models of personality, a lot of different tests as well. So we figured we'd look at the Big 5 personality test. Now, Big 5 is pretty well established as one of the gold standards for personality assessment, right? It gives you an idea of what your personality is like, what kind of traits do you have, what kind of approach do you have to learning, to social interaction, those kind of things.
So you may take that test to apply for a job, to a team motivation, executive, sometimes have like their executive trainings, looking at their personality. So let's start with the big picture. What are the Big 5? What are the Big 5 personalities?
Okay, so number 1 is openness. Right. Number 2 is conscientiousness. Number 3 is extroversion.
A little young in there, yeah.
Number 4, agreeableness. Agreeableness. And number 5, we'll leave this towards the end, neuroticism.
Yeah. So we're not going to cover them all today. We're going to start with the openness.
Openness.
Yeah, because it really is one of the key parts of if you're going to be a coach and being coached is all about and changing your life, being open to new experiences.
Absolutely. So a good way to think about openness is what's the opposite of openness? It's that fixed, closed mindset, right? That you think, I'm never going to change. This is the way I am. This is my personality. I'm done.
Or my life is never going to change. There's no new experience coming in for me. This is my lot in life. And
might as well get used to it.
Get used to it, cope with it. And you're really not open and it doesn't mean you're doing it on purpose, but you just don't have that capacity to see possibility.
Yeah, that's right. And also it's important for coaches because that means you don't believe others can change. If your mindset is limited or closed or rigid, you believe, well, people are who they are and that's the end of the story. What's the point of changing them, right? Or helping them change.
Another point too is that when you are a coach and you're interviewing clients, they need to have a little bit of this openness to experience. And sometimes people are they call it uncoachable because they're not open to experience. And even if you're the most fabulous coach in the world and have all the great skills and experience, if you have a client that's not open to new experiences, they're not going to get results. So it's very important for the coach and the client to have that openness to really facilitate change.
Yes, and all of these are they're scales. Essentially, there are spectrums. In other words, everyone has some level of openness, right? Because they're learning, they're willing to learn and grow and expand. The question is, to what degree do you have this trait?
Yeah.
Right? How open are you to learning, to changing?
Well, and it's, even think about, I mean, in all areas of life, religion, being very rigid in your religious beliefs and not open to be curious about other systems or other parts, or being so firm and you know what your problems are and you know how to solve them, and you're not open to learning something new about yourself, and you're just kind of stuck. And that's like the extreme. And then the other extreme is that openness, like you're always having new experiences, that almost like there's no balance in a way, where you're always on an adventure.
Good point.
Yeah. So you could have that extreme.
That's right.
So how can it enrich a Jungian coach
and
their ability to navigate this other people, like to help the person work with other people? Yeah.
So the associations with this openness can help us understand that question. Curiosity, creativity, and symbolic thinking. These are the three primary ones that we can talk about in the depth Jungian coaching kind of paradigm, right? So curiosity means you're curious about the world. You want to learn more of how things work. Also, of course, your human nature. You want to understand how your mind works and how your client's mind is working, and how you can help them as a coach through that curiosity that you bring to the sessions. As opposed to, as Walt Whitman would say, be curious, not judgmental. Yeah. And it's like we tend to the rigid personality wants to just judge others instead of be curious of like, why would they think that? Why would they act that way? Why are my parents were so hard on me as a kid? Instead of thinking they were just bad, you're open to and be curious about, well, maybe there is a new way I could see this situation. It's just so important in relationships. Yeah, absolutely. And even judging a person, I know in a lot of personal development, there's labels thrown around of, I'm this or I'm that fixed diagnosis, and to be open and curious about maybe there's another side to you, or another aspect of you, or a potential in you, to have that curiosity and open to experience that. And don't you think that a lot of people, because of the ego, it stops them from having that openness? That the ego wants more predictability and more, more of the same than anything new. Well, that's a good point, right? From the Jungian perspective, the ego wants or creates the persona, which we would call personality, in order to predict and to manage the predictability of life. In other words, it wants to be able to predict what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen the next moment. And that quality, there's nothing wrong with it, right? It serves us well for survival, for social interaction, but it can also limit us if we're too rigid with it. If we want to control our life, we know we get neurotic, right? We get anxious, we get upset, or when things are uncertain, we feel uncomfortable and we can't go there, right? So curiosity is associated with that openness, because it gives us a sense of how open are you to kind of questioning the status quo a little bit, to question the status quo, to experience new things and new ways of doing the same thing that you've been doing. And without that, there's very little chance of growth. Well, and you think about, we both worked in big companies, and you worked in the healthcare field and the bureaucracy. Well, why do you do that? Well, because we've always done that. And how many times have we approached, our life that way? It's like, this is what I know works. And I don't know, it feels very scary to do something else, change careers. Like a lot of our students come to our training because they are not happy with the status quo. They want to go to
a new and inspiring career, but there's still a little hesitation. And I think there's two ways to live your life. One way is to live in, like, do things as you always have done and have the predictable, ordinary life. And then the other is to have comfort in knowing that you can be creative in the moment and that you can handle whatever, like, unpredictable things happen in life, and you can handle them. And you'll notice that people that have that, like, rigidness or that non-openness, when a crisis happens in their life, they almost fall apart. Where someone else who has that curiosity and creativity, they're like, oh, okay, well, let me see what I can do with this, and let me make the best of this. During COVID was a perfect experience. Some people shut themselves down. A lot of coaches just were doing their business because we're like, well, no one's going to want coaching now. And the people that survived and thrived are people that said, well, how do we make this creative? We started doing videos instead of audio. We changed the way we did our business, and we adapted. And that openness to new experiences is really the key. So you can rely on your own creativity, or you can rely on the past and your conditioning.
That's right. And creativity, of course, is another one of these important constructs of openness. Creativity, in the Jungian sense, comes from the unconscious, in particular the collective unconscious. So it doesn't come the way we perceive it to come from our ingenuity or our
fancy writing. Yes.
Real creativity for Jung comes from trusting in the contents of the collective unconscious, which arise through dreams, through intuition, through active imagination.
Can you describe the collective unconscious for people who are new to that term?
Not really, but I'll give it a shot. So if you think about your personal unconscious, you can think of it as a storehouse, like maybe your garage or a closet where you put stuff that you don't need, or you need it for later, but not in the moment. And so it's a place to store your memories, repressed emotions, repressed wishes,
conditioning,
your past conditioning, past learning, those kind of things, right? So you store it for a later date, or perhaps, like most of us, we forget about the stuff that we store in the garage, and years later we might go back and look at it.
Why did I hang on to this?
Yeah, we carry it around for a long time. So that's a kind of a simplified image of our personal unconscious mind, as opposed to our conscious mind, which is our everyday waking mind, like with what we use to solve problems and to navigate the social world. The collective unconscious, Jung says, think of it as a repository of humanity. All the generations that have come before us have contributed to that collective unconscious,
millions
and
of
have
years.
stored and contributed to the content that is in the collective unconscious. Now, he says, we as individuals have access to that if we do our inner work. In other words, if we integrate our shadow and we understand I'm not just this individual personality.
That I'm connected to something deeper.
I'm connected to something deeper, which he called the psyche, which translates as soul, which means it's a collective experience of our humanity, our connection to nature.
So if you think about, like, the personal unconscious would be like wisdom light, where you are getting, like, you're making decisions based on past experience. So there is like a little wisdom there, like, don't put your hand on the hot stove, watch out for people with this facial expression, don't risk this, don't risk that, go for this, go for that, kind of small. But when we're going into the collective, we're having more access to wisdom that's beyond our personal experience. And we're getting generational humanity wisdom that's much more vast.
That's right. So,
but it's really hard to access that, like you said, until we do our shadow work, which is the first stage in Jungian coaching and what we teach our clients and our students.
Yeah. So the question, can curiosity, creativity, and symbolic thinking enhance the Jungian coach's ability to navigate the complexity of the psyche? Of course, right? This openness trait, if you're open, if you're curious, if you're creative, and you're able to think in symbolic terms, it gives you a great advantage in working with the depths of the psyche, because otherwise you're going to want to stay in the predictable realm, which is the conscious mind. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you won't be able to access this deeper, rich aspect of the psyche.
So the $1 million question is, why do we need to navigate the complexity of the psyche? Like, why would someone need that?
Yes.
Why do we need that in our life, in our world? What impact does that have on our lives when we do that? When we're open to new experiences, we're open to this symbolic type of thinking. I could say one thing, and I'd love to hear your input, but for me, it's the symbolic thinking, their symbolic life has been so profound. Because instead of looking at even like things that seem like bad luck or weird, things that are happening that are not going your way, instead of thinking, oh, poor me, and how to navigate or cope with these difficult situations, if you can look at it symbolically or pay attention to your dreams and see that there's some bigger picture here than just this little event that's dictating your life, you start to see your connectedness to everything. And then you realize that the outer world and the inner world are one, and you start to regain power. And that's really where you get to be really creative, talking about creativity in life. Then you are able to feel this confidence that you can enter new experiences because you have all these inner resources versus depending on just your conditioning and then what the world is going to give you and the chance that maybe things will go good or bad.
Yeah, from the Jungian perspective, symbolic thinking is the opposite of what we do in our waking life. So in our waking life, our thinking is very linear because that's the way we experience the world. Space-time is linear to us, meaning it goes from past to present to future, and we kind of figure things out in that kind of logical, linear way. Symbolic thinking goes beyond that, and it's irrational, intuitive, emotional, symbolic. In other words, a symbol doesn't have a clear definition. It can mean a lot of things. It can mean its opposite at some point. Therefore, it's irrational. When you're able to think in symbolic terms, you're going beyond the rationality of your conscious mind, and you're tapping into the unconscious that's paying attention in your life, but you're unaware of it. It's like it's hidden in plain sight. It's always conscious, it's always paying attention, but our conscious mind only focuses on what we can see, feel, touch, kind of talk about, those kind of things, which is the conscious experience.
And so a depth coach compared to an ordinary coach would work on that conscious level, would be very externalized, would be like, well, let's look at what the options are here. Well, you can do A or B. You can keep your boundaries. You can communication skills, change your behavior, maybe even think positive, but on the conscious level, right? I could think positive and have a different attitude toward things. I could work with my emotions to be, not angry all the time, all those things. But a depth coach, that deeper experience of symbolism, and you're not just rearranging the furniture, you're actually being maybe a direct participant in your own destiny versus just trying to navigate life through the external.
Yes. So if you're interested in becoming a depth coach and you want to cultivate this ability of openness or this personality construct, you can practice by engaging in art. Art almost immediately takes us out of linear forms of thinking into that more open, creative, intuitive, symbolic way of thinking.
Yeah.
And so it's a great practice.
Well, it's also communicating with your unconscious, beyond the conscious. When you're looking at art, you're taking in so much more than just a thought or reading a book. Just reading a not an imaginary book. Reading like facts is very different than having like even a fiction book and having that imagination and that art and that literature.
Yes. Literature, of course, is an art form, but it includes language so that it really kind of engages the whole mind, because you have to, in order to understand and process language, you have to use your left brain. But to understand the meaning of what you're reading, you engage the right brain, and of course the whole kind of construct of them together gives you that beautiful experience of understanding the story that takes you on a journey. And so it's a great way to cultivate the mind and your ability to go deeper in symbolic forms of thinking. And of course, the coaching skills that we teach even take you further into this, because then it teaches you how to apply this openness in working with your clients. Jung himself said, learn everything, all the techniques, all the theory, but then forget it.
Yeah.
Drop it.
Don't read scripts.
And just be with your client as two souls collaborating on a creative journey.
I know, I always tell our trainer, people in our training, that they're like, what do I do in my first session? What do I do in my second? It's like every client's going to be different, and you're taking the journey with them. You're not designing the journey for them, which I think a lot of people feel like they have to like create a curriculum for their clients. And it's like, you don't have to, because the client will always bring to the session their stage that they're at and the thing they need to work on, even if they're not conscious of it. I would have clients like show up on a call and they would say, something happened. And I'm like, ooh, well, let's look at it with curiosity. Let's think about it in a symbolic way. And if this was a dream, what would all these elements point to? And then usually what comes through at the end of the call is the wisdom from the client, because they're able to answer their own questions by you asking them the right questions, to be curious and open, instead of just saying, you know what? Oh yeah, that person is bad, and let's talk about communicating differently and dictating to the client what they should do, or nudging them to take some kind of behavior change. You're actually getting curious and creative with them. And it's such a profound tool that the client uses, because they can use this type of thinking for the rest of their life. We're really changing the way they think. We're actually encouraging them to be more open to experience.
Yeah, so openness to experience definitely gives us a sense of this personality quality or characteristic that depth coaches need to be a depth-oriented coach. The next one that we'll be talking about is conscientiousness, the structured and ethical coach.
Okay, we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and all those great podcast services. And we'll see you next week with another episode. See you soon.
See you soon.